Kim Piez and welcome to My Story, His Story. What do we know about Seventh-day Adventist church leaders and how has God influenced them? In this series we take a closer look at the lives of these Christian leaders and invite them to share their stories with us. Sitting here with me is National Indigenous Ministries Director Steve Piez. Welcome, Steve.
Oh, hi Ken.
Thank you so much for joining us today. You've had an interesting childhood and it's shaped who you are today. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I did, Kim. I had a great childhood. I grew up in Papua New Guinea and got lots of really good memories about that time. But you know, for some reason growing up, I never believed that I was good enough for God. And you know, I used to struggle with it. I remember I used to have this dream as a kid that Jesus was coming back with all the clouds and the angels, and it was all brilliant, you know. And Mum and Dad, my brother, they'd rise up into the heavens, and I was like down on the ground with feet full of concrete. It was just a terrible dream, and it's a dream that I had from time to time. And the idea that I just couldn't be good enough for God was something I struggled with as a kid. As I got older, I kept having these kinds of dreams and these thoughts. But as I went on my journey, I sort of thought, mate, this is all too hard. And bit by bit, I lost the vision, I lost the interest. I had my spiritual highs and then I'd fall away from it. The years went by and teenage years, you know how it is with the teen years, you can kind of, there's plenty of distractions anyway, yeah. And, you know, eventually I suppose I lost sight of God altogether because I didn't think I could do it. I just drifted away. Fortunately, I didn't stop attending church. I'd attend church irregularly, but I used to go and catch up with friends, and so that sort of kept me in there a little bit. And the years went by and they rolled on, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years or more. And I remember I shifted cities and I started going to a church not far from home. Some friends invited me, and I remember hearing some preaching then by a great preacher. And he preached regularly on Romans, and Romans 7 and Romans 8, and I still remember the sermons and the impact they had on me. The fact that the Christian experience is an up and down experience. We face those kinds of challenges, but for those of us that are in Jesus, there's no condemnation. And man, when I heard that was like music to my ears. I just hung on, I thought, man, this is what I want. And what I believed before, for some reason, I don't know why I believed it, but it wasn't good news. It was bad news. It wasn't the gospel. That it's all about what Jesus has done for me and not what I can do for Jesus, in one sense. That changed my whole focus. It turned me around and said, I want this. And I latched onto it. And I suppose from that time since, I've continued my journey with God. I was listening to a bit of music around that time, and a guy by the name of Bob Wolfgram really impressed me. He's a singer here in Australia, written some great songs. I'd like to sing a song for you today if I could.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Father in heaven, I come on bended knee. I come so far beneath you. I pray look down on me. It's not because I'm worthy or through anything that I've done. It's just because you promised to forgive the one who'll come. And Father, much more than this, I cannot even come. I only give my will to you, that your will shall be done. The cross I cannot carry, oh, it's huge and out of control. I ask you to take it for me to the Calvary of my soul. And Father, when you do all grace, in your mercy you will forgive. Take my life and lead me, 'cause I need your life to live. Oh, I stand completely broken, but I'm not frightened like before. My substitute is Jesus, who stands perfect in your love. And so, Father in heaven, I come on bended knee. I come so far beneath you. I pray, look down on me. It's not because I'm worthy or through anything that I've done. It's just because you promised to forgive the one who'll come. Yeah.
Welcome back to My Story, His Story. I'm talking with National Indigenous Ministries Director Steve Piez. Steve, I've really enjoyed hearing your story this morning about your struggle and feeling like you're not good enough, and I really enjoyed your song. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, great.
So you've had your share of struggles and then you came back to church. What happened?
Yeah, well, it wasn't easy to start with, I can tell you. I started coming back to church, but I still had all this lifestyle, all these habits that I'd sort of, acquired over years of, being fairly disinterested in church, I suppose.
What sort of things?
Well, when I first started coming back to church, I made a commitment. I wasn't going to go out on Friday night. And so I thought, oh, well, okay. I had all my friends used to invite me to parties. We'd go to the clubs, and I said, okay, Friday night's out, guys. I'll go out with you on Saturday night or other nights of the week. So that was the first thing. No more clubs, no more dancing, no more whatever on Friday nights. And bit by bit, it's interesting, that was my first decision, but eventually I stopped going to clubs altogether. And I changed my friends, a lot of my friends changed. And it's interesting how you do change. Once you make a decision to come back to God, and God starts working on your heart. I even like drinking. When I came back to church, I didn't stop drinking straight away, but I made a decision to be more responsible about it. But God led me along the track, and eventually drinking ceased to be a part of my life. But one thing I struggled with, and I struggled with it and struggled with it. I started smoking when I was about 15, and maybe 16, somewhere there, and I just couldn't shake that. And I smoked for 15 or so years, and 8 of those years that I smoked would have been as a church attending Christian. And I had some brilliant church members that I went to church with, great elders, great church leaders, and they were so patient with me. But I tried a 5-day plan, and I gave up on the 5-day plan. I was off it for a couple of weeks, but the devil, he had his hooks in me with the smoking, and I was back onto it again. I remember the first time I went back onto the cigarettes was because I'd gone out drinking with some friends, and having a glass of beer and a cigarette was kind of like what you did. And but God worked with me, and I knew that if I focused on my cigarettes and said, oh, I'm not good enough for God like I used to do, then I was lost. Thought, I'm going to church, I'm going to hang on to this is a good thing. And I took myself to church, and I'd have my cigarette before I got to church in the car. I'd duck into Sabbath schools. I love Sabbath school. Sabbath school's where you connect with people and get into the Word. And after that, I'd duck out of that last hymn for Sabbath school, have my cigarette, walk around the block, I'd come back. I did this for 8 years. Second hymn before the sermon, I'd duck out, have my cigarette, come back and shake the pastor's hand. I used to get discouraged about it. I'm laughing about it now, but I did get discouraged about it. But I knew that God loved me, and I knew that He had me, that I was in the kingdom, And I knew that given time, he'd help me get the better of it, and he did. I gave up smoking about 5 or 6 times. Sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, but the last time I gave up smoking was many years ago now. And it's great. I can't describe how fantastic I felt when I had that thing behind me. It's kind of like this burden that I was carrying around, and Jesus helped me take it away, and it was just fantastic. Now, the interesting thing for me, as these lifestyle things fell away, life became better for me. And when I gave up smoking, it's amazing how things started falling into place. And very shortly after that, I felt the call to the ministry. And that was just great. You know, I had some people say, Steve, you'd make a great minister. And then that led me into that kind of, yeah, I'd like, as a kid, I wanted to be a minister. But I had those struggles. And I fell away from it. And it was kind of like a reawakening of that sort of dream. And so, yeah, I got my family and we packed up and we moved up to begin ministerial studies at Avondale College. So, yeah, that's kind of a bit of a journey there. One thing I wanted to say, though, when I first started coming back to church, you know, the whole suit and tie thing. And I wasn't a suit and tie kind of a guy, despite how you see me here today. I'm still not a suit and tie kind of a guy. But it was great that people were patient with me, and I thought, I'm going to be authentic to God. And regardless of how you are, regardless of how you dress, just come to God as you are, and he'll work the changes in you that he wants to see happen. So yeah, that's my story, Kim.
That's great. And along the way, you still had some challenges though, didn't you?
Yeah, you know, life, look, I don't want to sound like woe is me, because I've had a fantastic life. And God's been great to me. But I'm sharing this because, you know, other people might be going through some of the same things. I know that in my 3rd year of ministerial studies, I went through a marriage breakup. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I would think that's the toughest thing. Oh, without a doubt, without question, that's the toughest thing I've ever experienced. You know, questioning of self, who am I? Am I a worthwhile human being? All those kinds of things that you work through when you go through this kind of breakup. I suppose I don't want to go on about it, but you know, it's, as a church, we need to be mindful of this because people are struggling out there.
Do you have any words of advice for those who are listening?
Yeah, Kim, you know, the New Testament tells us that the church is the body of Christ. You know, effectively we're God's arms and legs. And the gospel makes a big deal about that as well. Jesus talks about it's important what you do for people. And so when we see people in our church community around us that are going through these struggles, reach out and put your arm around them because they're needing your love. They're people, they're feeling like they're untouchable. And I remember people putting their arms around me. I can remember just melting. And it didn't matter that it was my mate or it was someone else. Just that human touch was just fantastic and so healing. So as a church, let's just be loving and warm to these people. Let's not stand back and say, oh, what have they done? Or, you know, what's going on there and who was at fault? Forget about that. We're all sinners. We've all fallen away. Jesus puts his arm around us, irrespective of what we do. And that's my advice. Let's just do that to people that are struggling and make our church a warm and, you know, just a great place to be. You know, one thing I want to tell you though, Kim, is that I really struggled with God during these years. Really struggled. Because I prayed and prayed that God would put my marriage back together again. I prayed that he'd help me, you know, become the kind of person, a better kind of person, that, you know, things would just work out. And I didn't pray just once, it was constant. And no matter how much I prayed, nothing happened. The slide just kept happening. And the marriage folded. And after the marriage, I prayed that there'd be reconciliation. And nothing happened. And it really challenged my faith in God. I still believed God existed, but, you know, did he really care about me? And that's something that I really struggled with. And you know, time's kind of worked its way through that. But at the time when I was in it, I just couldn't see any purpose or anything. Now as I sit back with time, I can reflect on the things that have happened. I can see God's leading. But as I went through it, I just thought, I'm just going to hang on. I know God's there. And even though it doesn't feel like I just hung on. You know, I pulled out of college. I went back to my profession. I was a plumber by trade. And I went back to the plumbing. And, I enjoy plumbing. I enjoy mixing with the guys in the building trade. And I just got on with life. And the days rolled by. And that year came and it went. And the new year began. And work was going well. I was working on a roof, not far from putting a roof on a house, I should say. And I remember one morning, I went to get up to go to work. I sort of woke up and I heard that lovely sound of rain. Those in the building trade know that when it rains, you know that's it, you have the day off. But as I lay in bed and I was thinking, I thought, hang on a minute, what is today? I thought, today's registration day. Registration for college. And I don't know why I knew that. I think maybe I'd received some information in the mail or something saying it. And as I lay there, I just became impressed that I should go back and re-enroll in college and start putting my life back together again. And you know, the longer I lay in bed, the stronger that urge became. And I got up and I went to college and I re-enrolled. The amazing thing is, Kim, if it hadn't have rained that day, I would have gone up and gone back to work. And who knows what would have happened. I'm not saying I wouldn't be here today, but I think it's unlikely. And it's not just that instance, but I can see many instances since then where God has led me. And He's just been guiding me. It's just been a great journey.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Stay with us. After this break, we'll have more stories from Steve. Welcome back to My Story, His Story. I've been talking with National Indigenous Ministries Director, Steve Piez. Steve, I've really enjoyed hearing your stories today. You've talked about your struggle with God as a teenager, you've talked about your smoking addiction, and you've talked about going and studying for the ministry, leaving and then coming back again. And it's amazing that you're here today. Tell us a little bit about your favourite Bible character.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, Kim, that, you know, I've got lots of favourite Bible characters, but I thought I might talk about my least favourite Bible character today, if that's all right. You know, I love the Old Testament. I love the Old Testament narratives, particularly Genesis and through those stories. And if you go back in your Bibles to around Genesis 30, around those chapters, you'll see the story of Jacob. And you know, Jacob had a twin brother named Esau, and they were born, and I kind of like Esau more than I like Jacob. Esau was a fresh outdoors man. He smelt of the fields. What you saw was what you got. But Jacob, he came out the moment he was born. It seems he was sort of hanging around the tents, trying to think what he could get into. Scheming, plotting. Jacob's name, I believe, means deceiver. And that was Jacob, to a T. He deceived his brother a number of times. You know, those of you that know the story, you know, Esau came in from the field when they grew up. Esau came in from the field. He was hungry. He may have been out for a few days and hadn't eaten properly. And here's Jacob cooking a big pot of beans, I'm sure it was full of garlic and onions. Oh, it would have smelled great. And he said, give us something to eat. And Jacob's immediate response wasn't, oh, my poor brother's hungry, he needs something to eat. Jacob's immediate thought was, what's in it for me? He said, yeah, okay, if you sell me your birthright. And we see that time and time again. Then Jacob deceives his brother, you know, and he goes into his father to get the birthright blessing and pretends to be Esau. And poor old blind Isaac doesn't have a hope and blesses the wrong guy. And that's the story of Jacob's life. Things don't change. He flees from his father's house because Esau is so wild with him. He goes to live with his uncle Laban. Same thing happens. Interesting though, on the way to see Laban, Jacob has this dream, and we all know the dream of angels ascending and descending from heaven. And Jacob wakes up, you know, and says, wow, this is an amazing place. But in the dream, God makes a covenant, if you like, an agreement with Jacob. Says, I'll be your God, just like I was your father's God and your grandfather's God. And it amazes me that God says to this guy, this deceiver, this wretch of a person, that I will be your God. And I love that he accepted him. Jacob goes to be with his uncle, and he's still behaving in the same way. His uncle deceives him, he deceives his uncle. The pattern continues and continues. And in fact, in the end, Jacob starts to fall out with his uncle and has to flee from, you know, where his uncle was living in the same way he had to flee from home in the first place. This guy's got serious issues. And as he leaves and he runs away, he's coming back to confront his brother. All these years, he's been 20 or so years away now. And he's stressed. He knows Esau's wild with him, and he doesn't know if Esau's forgiven him in those years. So Jacob was doing his best to impress his brother, because of course he was nervous about it. And as the time drew near, he was getting more and more nervous. He sent his family across, in the evening he sent his family across this little brook that was there, and he stayed back on his own in the evening, late at night. And he had this amazing experience where this guy, the Bible doesn't say too much about it, but this guy came from nowhere, it seems, and started wrestling with him, of all things. And they wrestled and wrestled and wrestled all night, the story tells us. And as time progressed, Jacob started to twig that this wasn't an ordinary person that he was wrestling with. And as morning came, this person says, let me go. And he says, no, I won't let you go until you bless me. Because he worked out, hey, this is a messenger of God or something. And the person that he's wrestling with does bless him. What I didn't say though, Kim, is prior to this event, Jacob had prayed long and hard. And his prayer went something like this: I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. Jacob knew he was a wretch. And this, in a sense, is an answer to Jacob's prayer. God visited him and he wrestled with him. And as he wrestled, like I said, Jacob wouldn't let him go. And he said, bless me. And the guy he's wrestling with, who we know as God, said, what's your name? He says, my name's Jacob, you know, the deceiver. That's who I am. Who are you? I'm Jacob, the deceiver. And he said, no. He said, well, you know what? Your name's going to be Israel from now on. Fantastic. God still accepted Jacob. Kim, but the powerful thing about that story is the very next day, Jacob meets with Esau and he says to Esau, yeah, I'll go with you. You go on ahead and I'll come behind you. What did he do? Did he follow his brother? No, he didn't. He deceived his brother again and he took off somewhere else. But you know, despite Jacob's failings, despite the kind of person he was, God kept his promises to him. Man, that's great. Because I look at my life and I see how I have this up and down experience and I let God down time and time again. I just want to say we serve a fantastic God, a patient and loving God. We can have confidence in him because the promises he made, he will keep.
Thank you so much, Steve. I've really enjoyed hearing your stories today. Thank you for joining us on My Story, His Story, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.